Ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask that you join me in making an arduous trip. I'm going to bring you back through time. Okay? We're going to go back to the year 1799. Good news, you're in the French army. Okay? Bad news, you find yourself in Egypt. You're part of Napoleon's expeditionary force to Egypt. Now, you're not just any soldier. You're part of Napoleon's scientific corps. You've been brought along to evaluate any of the Egyptian treasures that Napoleon's army might encounter while they're there. Now, you grew up in France. You were surrounded by wine, fine cheese, beautiful women. But that's all behind you now, because you're in Egypt. Now, you're encountering heat, lack of water, and 1,000 different bugs that bite. Life isn't very good for you right now. To make the insult even greater, on this particular day, despite your lofty role within the French army, you've been assigned to a work detail to go on the outside of the fort, Fort Julian, which is where you're staying, and do a repair job. What can you do? You go along. But when you reach the outside of the fort, your attention is caught by a stone that's been worked into the fort. It was actually used to construct the fort. The reason that it attracts your attention is because on this stone, you notice that there's some Egyptian hieroglyphics. Now, hieroglyphics are to be found all over Egypt. Egyptian culture has existed for over 3,000 years. They put hieroglyphics on their statues, on their buildings, on pretty much everything. But the problem is, nobody can read hieroglyphics. The last person who knew how to read hieroglyphics died over 1,000 years ago. So there's this fantastic country with all sorts of mystery, but it's a riddle that nobody can unlock. Anyway, your attention is attracted by this stone. And the reason you're attracted by it is because you recognize that it has hieroglyphics on it. You take a closer look at it and you see that that's not all that's on the stone. In fact, there appear to be 3 different languages on the stone. The first one, of course, is hieroglyphics. The second one is an Egyptian form of longhand, which was popular a few years ago. But more important than all that, the third language on the stone is Greek. And you read Greek. Now, very quickly, you take a look at the Greek text, and it turns out it's talking about the arrival of a new pharaoh, a young pharaoh, and the fact that taxes need to be paid to this pharaoh. A very boring message. But you're excited, because on this stone, and by the way, it's a huge stone. It's about 1,600 pounds. It's probably about 23 inches wide, 43 inches tall, and about 10 inches thick. On this stone is the same message written in 3 different languages. And very quickly you understand what you have here. You have the key to unlocking an entire country. 3,000 years of hieroglyphics. All right, I'm bringing you back. We're coming back to the present day. Welcome back. Good news. You don't have to worry about bugs, heat, or lack of water. You've got other issues though, right? So for those of us who are members of IT departments, what's interesting is we probably find ourselves in a similar role to the ancient Egyptians. We speak a language, we have a society that the outside world, the rest of our business, doesn't really understand. Now, within IT, we like to think very highly of ourselves. We know that we accomplish great things on a daily basis. But it brings up an interesting question. How does the rest of the company see the IT department? So if you go out and you ask them, what do you think they're going to say? Fantastic, bright, sharp people, always there to help me out. They do miracles on a daily basis. The answer is probably not. Really what you're going to hear if you talk to the rest of the company is that their perception, right or wrong, doesn't matter, their perception of the IT department is that it's slow and it's expensive. Now we know this isn't really a fair way to view it, but in all honesty, it is the way that the IT department is viewed by the rest of the company. And I'd say this is a problem. It's especially a problem when you encounter something like, oh, I don't know, a global financial meltdown, and when the company has to start to cut back. Where are they going to make their cutbacks? Are they going to have cut back in the departments that are a critical part of how the company does business? Or are they going to make their cuts in the department that's always been sort of a black hole for funding, has always sort of, in their own opinion, sort of slowed the company down? Now you may not realize it if you work in an IT department, but you have competition. The company doesn't have to use your resources, right? They can outsource, they can offshore, they can buy software packages and services from other companies and have them come in and take care of them, right? So whatever job you're doing, there's probably somebody else that for the proper amount of money would be more than willing to do it and potentially do it quicker, or maybe even cheaper than you're doing. So your job is always at risk. So this perception problem is a real challenge for CIOs, for people who are running IT departments. And for years, they've been looking for a way to solve it. I can tell you right now, they failed. If you've been around as long as I have, you have probably encountered one or more management fads. Let's see, what do we have? We have Six Sigma. Very familiar with that one. Probably you haven't done it. If you haven't lived through it, congratulations. You've probably heard of it though. There was Total Quality Management a few years ago. Throw in there Matrix Management, which has always been a popular one, and then add 3 or 4 more over the last 10 to 15 years. And these have all been solutions looking for the right problem. But the problem that we have, which is the rest of the company has a poor communication with the IT department, aren't addressed by those particular solutions. And so we find ourselves here today in 2011 with the same problem that we've always had. We can't communicate with the rest of the company. So that would be a pretty depressing situation if it wasn't for the fact that I stand before you today saying, I think I know what the solution to this problem is. There's a technique called the balanced scorecard. And the reason I like it so much is that it's not new. Okay? The balanced scorecard has been around for 20 years. It was invented by a consultant and a Harvard University accounting professor. And originally it was constructed for one reason and one reason only. What companies had discovered is that when they tried to use financial measurements to evaluate the performance of departments, it didn't work out. Financial measurements being how much money do we give you and how much money do you make, right? When they tried to use that as a criteria to evaluate the performance of a department, it didn't hold out. Some departments they gave very little money to and they actually produced a lot. Some departments they gave a great deal to and they produced very little, and so clearly something was broken here. These gentlemen were hired to take a look and determine what the story was. They came up with a set of performance metrics that more accurately reflected what was going on, and they called it the balanced scorecard. Now, over the course of 20 years, the balanced scorecard, which started out as a performance measurement system, evolved into a communication tool, and it's actually evolved from there to a strategy implementation tool. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So, in every IT department, there is a strategy that gets rolled out at the beginning of the year. And it goes under a bunch of different guises. Sometimes it's called a strategy. Sometimes it's called 5 core principles of what we want to do. Sometimes it's called a ladder. You pick your vocabulary term. But at the beginning of the year, there's always an announcement. There's always an email that comes from the top down saying, this is what we're going to accomplish this year. And then it goes away. And we just don't talk about it anymore. And we just make it through the year. But another one will come out next year. What's interesting is in a study of departments, worldwide actually, they discovered that less than 10% of departments are actually able to successfully implement the strategy that they lay out at the beginning of the year. Less than 10%. Which means probably most of our departments fall into the 90% category, right? So that's another problem. So IT departments have a communication problem and they have a strategy implementation problem at the same time. The fantastic news that I have for you is that the balanced scorecard addresses both of these problems. What makes the balanced scorecard so special? Does it have some sort of magic to it? The answer is no. Okay? It's just a different way of looking at things. The balanced scorecard doesn't just show up and make your problems go away. You have to bring something to the table. Specifically, you have to bring 4 things to the table. The first thing that you need to bring to the table is a mission statement. And I can already hear you sort of groan, right? We all know about mission statements. We've all seen lots of mission statements, and we've probably all thrown a lot of mission statements away because they didn't really mean a lot for us, right? And I agree with you. It's probably the #1 most abused term and concept within business today. However, let me present something to you. What a mission statement is supposed to be is a very clear, short description of exactly what your department is there to do. That's it, no more. So for example, why does your IT department exist? There has to be a reason. I hope so, right? The other thing that you need to bring to the table is a vision statement. And if you didn't like the mission statement, you're not going to like the vision statement. Vision statements seem to be very touchy-feely. They're hard to get your hands around. But I'm going to tell you that a vision statement actually is a very practical thing. It's supposed to be your view of what the IT department can be in the future, right? And it has to be very concrete. You have to be able to describe exactly what that department's going to be so well that when you tell people your vision, they can picture what it's going to look like. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Your vision is something that you will never achieve. It is a goal. It's a shining beacon that you will travel towards, but you will never achieve, and that's fine. The third thing that you need to bring to the table is a sense of values. Good news about this is that your department already has values. You don't have to think them up. Generally, values come from the top down. It has to do with how your management asks you to do things, and it has to do with what your management actually asks you to do. Take these together, and basically they reflect the values of your organization. Are you customer focused? Are you cost focused? Are you delivery schedule focused? The list goes on, but your department has a very specific one. And the fourth and final thing you need to bring to the table, of course, is a strategy. If you don't have a strategy, feel free to make one up. But it's the goals of what you want to achieve this year. So a balanced scorecard is a very valuable tool. It's a powerful way that IT departments can improve their communication with other departments and how they can actually execute their strategy. You need to bring 4 things to the table, but with those 4 things, perhaps the balanced scorecard is your ticket to better communication with the rest of the company. Thank you very much.